All right. Welcome into an afternoon Panther-Lair show. Hope everyone's having a nice afternoon. We had to call one on the fly, call an audible, and jump in here for a little afternoon edition. If you watched the live stream last night, it's Wednesday afternoon here, Wednesday, April 21st. If you watched the live stream last night on April 20th, Tuesday night, our regular weekly live stream, and you listened to the podcast that we released here today, you heard just a regular podcast, humming along, doing all our normal things. We had about 20, 23, 24 minutes into it, and then all of a sudden, there was news. There was commitment news as Pitt landed a transfer guard, Jamarius Burton, a kid out of transferring in from Texas Tech. And that sort of threw a wrench into everything, and we sort of scrambled. I mean, Jamarius Burton, not really on the radar, not really a guy that we knew a whole lot about. So we kind of scrambled during the podcast. I was, looking over here, looking at my other laptop. I got two computers set up here. I'm scrambling, trying to find stats and info about him, see what we can learn about Jamarius Burton, kind of on the fly, while keeping the podcast going. Obviously, that had its ups and downs. It was exciting. No, there's any question about that. It was exciting to have news. I always wonder what's going to happen if news breaks in the middle of a podcast, how we're going to handle that and how we're going to approach it. Sometimes we know more about, the situation. Sometimes we know less about the situation, and certainly Jamarius Burton committing last night was one of those situations where we didn't know a whole lot. And so we sort of, like I say, did research on the fly for the final half of the podcast and talked a lot about it then. But when there are commitments, when there's big news, we like to have a live stream fired up, a reaction podcast. And particularly given the fact that this news happened in the middle of a live stream, I thought, well, we got to get together here on Wednesday afternoon. We've had a chance, Wednesday afternoon, and talk about it a little bit more. We've had a chance to dig into the situation, talk to a few different people who know Jamarius Burton. They've followed his college career, and we've gotten a little more insight on him, a little more perspective. And a little bit more on Dan Oladapo, the forward who transferred from Oakland. He announced that on Monday night. Pitt announced that they had officially signed Dan Oladapo on Wednesday, here earlier today. And so, we've had a chance in the last 48 hours or less than 48 hours to look into Oladapo a little bit more. We've had a chance in the last, 18 hours or so to look into Jamarius Burton a little bit more. And, so we've learned more about these guys. And so I thought, all right, let's fire up the live stream. Let's have a little conversation on YouTube and then put a podcast out. You guys can listen to this audio podcast along the way. Of course, the YouTube, the website, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the place you can go for the live streams. You can subscribe to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube, so you always get notifications when we go live in a situation like this. In case you don't see, because we tweeted about it. I put something on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com about it. But in case you missed those things, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get a notification. You'll know, hey, Panther-Lair.com, they got something going on right now. I better get in there and check it out. So if you're watching the live stream, and maybe especially if you're not, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then you can join the live stream as it's going on. The fun part about that is you can post comments and questions in the live chat, and we can have a little conversation. So see people filtering into the live stream. Glad to see everyone this afternoon. If you got things to say, have some comments, some questions about this situation, this development with Pitt landing a few new transfers, throw your comments and questions in there. All right, let's start with Jamarius Burton. Let's talk about him for a little bit because he's the newest one. He committed on Tuesday night. We've had a chance to look into him a little bit more. 6'4", 205-pound guard, 200, 205, 210, depending on where you look. 6'4" is, that's a listed height, and so we'll take it. Colleges and high school guys tend to maybe exaggerate heights and weights a little bit. So, but even if he's 6'3", you sort of take that on the relative scale that everyone's height is exaggerated. And so, it's 6'4" in terms of a listed roster size. But anyway, kind of a bigger guard, not a smaller guy, not a 5'11" guard or anything like that. And an interesting backstory of a guy originally from North Carolina, I think the Charlotte area, who went to Wichita State in the class of 2018, played 2 years with the Shockers, transferred last year to Texas Tech. and now is back in the transfer portal this year. And there's a lot of different angles and a lot of different things to consider in this situation. I think, potentially the first thing someone might look at and say is, why is he transferring twice? Why is this guy on the move 2 times now? Why is he going to be playing for 3 schools in 3 years? Is that a red flag? And I think that's a fair question. I think that's something that's, understandable that you would bring up, because he has played, he's going to be on his 3rd school in 3 years. And I guess the context there would be his first 2 years of college, he was at Wichita State. And we've learned in the past couple months what the situation was like at Wichita State. And actually, in doing some research on Jamarius Burton and finding some of the things that were written at the time he left Wichita State, he wasn't the only guy who left Wichita State 2 years ago. If you go back and look, Wichita State had something of a mass exodus. Surpassing what Pitt has experienced this offseason in terms of the number of starters who transferred out. And I think we've learned in the last few months that Wichita State was a bit of a toxic situation with Greg Marshall. And you can even find quotes from some of Jamarius Burton's teammates talking about what the situation was like and why they decided to leave Wichita State 2 years ago. And that it did have a lot to do with the coaching staff and sort of the culture around the program. So you have that as context, and then you say, okay, that's fine. That's why he left Wichita State. Why is he going again? Why is he transferring again out of, the school that he transferred to from Wichita State? Well, Texas Tech had a coaching change. Chris Beard went to Texas. And here again, Burton's not the only guy looking to transfer. As a matter of fact, Mac McClung, who I think is probably a little bit more of a prominent player nationally, is also in the transfer portal, also looking to transfer, and he's another guy who will be on his 3rd school in 3 years. He transferred to Texas Tech from Georgetown. And so I think when you add that context in with Burton of left Wichita State, which a lot of guys did when he did, and we've learned a lot about that situation in the last, like I say, this calendar year, and then leaving Texas Tech after a coaching change, and a year that quite frankly wasn't great for Jamarius Burton. And I think we'll probably dig into it more with him at some point in the future about what his year at Texas Tech was like. But as I've asked around and talked to some people, the expectation when Jamarius Burton transferred to Texas Tech was that he wasn't going to be eligible to play, that he would have to sit out due to the transfer rules. I think he transferred there with the expectation that the NCAA wouldn't give him a waiver to play. And so everybody expected him to just sit here, get used to being in Lubbock, as much as one can get used to being in Lubbock, I suppose, and then be ready to play this coming season, 21-22 season. At some point along the way, the Texas Tech coaching staff, their compliance department, whoever makes these sort of decisions said, well, let's put in for a waiver anyway. Let's just see what happens, but we're not really counting on a lot. And they ended up getting the waiver approved because the NCAA, who knows what they're going to do. I mean, it's a total crapshoot, and this will be relevant later. We're going to come back to this point about the, just complete blind dart situation that is dealing with the NCAA and getting waivers. Case in point, Nike Sabandi. But we're going to come back to that topic. So Texas Tech says, well, let's give it a try. Let's see what happens. We'll throw the waiver out there. We'll see we'll apply for the waiver, and we'll see if the NCAA grants it. They ended up granting it. And so Jamarius Burton ends up doing probably more than was expected this past season. And he played, 23 games. He started 4. He averaged 19 minutes a game. Didn't really do much in terms of scoring. Averaged about 3 field goal attempts per game, 3 2-point field goal attempts per game. Total 4 field goal attempts per game average, 4.1, and average 4.3 points per game, 1.8 rebounds. Not the kind of stats that you're going to really write home about. But I think one of the things we've really determined in the last, how many hours you want to call this, 17 hours, 18 hours since the news came out about Jamarius Burton committing to Pitt, to transfer to Pitt. I think one of the things we've all realized is that we need to look at his Wichita State years for maybe a better indication of who he is as a player, what he does on the court, and how he potentially could fit in with Pitt's roster. And I think that's what, as we've looked back at those 2 seasons with the Shockers, where he played, 67 games, he started 52 games, he averaged 7.9 points, 3.4 rebounds, 3.4 assists, 0.6 steals per game, 44% on 2-point shooting percentage, 41.8% from the floor. That's a better indication of who he is, I think. Now, there's always going to be a question of competition and whether or not, the step up from Wichita State to Texas Tech to go from the AAC to the Big 12, how significant that was, how that impacted his performance and his production. But I think when you look at his time at Wichita State and you see what he was able to do, the scoring he was able to put up, and the way he impacted the game, 100 plus assists every season at Wichita State, total of 228 assists over the course of 2 seasons. He's a guy who, I think showed a lot of potential of what he could be as a point guard in college basketball, and I think he showed that at Wichita State, and I think that's what you want to draw on when you look at what he could potentially do at Pitt. And the thing that strikes me, or really jumps out to me about Jamarius Burton and what he can do for Pitt's roster and rotation, is that he can do several things, that I think he can fit in multiple ways. The first thing I'm looking at him doing is being the backup point guard. That when Femi Odikale is in foul trouble or he needs time on the bench, he needs a little rest, whatever it is, this is the guy you can put in. Like I say, he had 228 assists in 67 games. At Wichita State. Didn't really play point guard at Texas Tech, from what I can gather. Played more sort of combo guard, off the ball type of role. But he was the point guard at Wichita State. And you might not want to bring him in to be your starting point guard in the ACC, but as your backup, as the guy who can come off the bench. And again, if Femi Odikale gets into foul trouble, if he just needs a rest, just a breather to get his legs back under him, if he's not playing well, if he needs someone to replace him, this is a viable option, which Pitt hasn't. I mean, they had this past season, they had a viable option as a backup point guard in Odikale, but really the 2 years before that, there wasn't a great backup point guard option. We talked about this a lot 2 years ago with Xavier Johnson, that when he got into foul trouble, or he was just not playing well, or he was playing out of control, or he wasn't playing the way he was supposed to be playing, Jeff Capel didn't have a lot he could do. He didn't have many options of where to go. This past season, Femi Odikale joins the roster, and he was able to bench Xavier Johnson a couple times after fouling out, or after taking technical fouls. He was able to bench him and have Odikale start the game and bring Johnson off the bench. That wasn't really an option 2 years ago. 3 years ago, I guess you would say Sidney Nadir. I think he was 3 years ago, right? I think he was Jeff Capel's first year. I could be wrong about that. But there wasn't really a viable backup point guard option that you could bring in. And I think that limited what Capel was able to do, how he was able to coach Xavier Johnson. I think it limited what he was able to do in terms of the rotation. Jamarius Burton gives them a viable option, and I think opens up the options, quite frankly, for Jeff Capel and how he coaches Femi Odikale and how he runs the team and the decisions he makes personnel wise and how they play. I think that's key, is that he can be a backup point guard, and this is one of the things we've talked about throughout this offseason. We've talked about those big needs, and center position is number one. The center position has always been the top priority this offseason. When I talked about the big questions that need to be answered this offseason, that's one of them. Do you get a new center? Who do you bring in to play this center position, particularly after Abdul Kareem Coulibaly transferred? But another one of the questions, one of the positions we've talked about, one of the needs on this roster is for a backup point guard, someone to come in and play in place of Femi Odikale, do all those things I just talked about. And so it fits there. But it also, I think Jamarius Burton also can fit into the larger guard rotation as a whole. I think he can play next to Femi Odikale. You can have two ball handlers on the court. You could play a small guard lineup, a small guard-oriented lineup with Burton or even Nike Sabandi lining up at maybe the 3. You know what I mean? I got Will Jeffers here on the screen right next to me. This picture came up at the perfect time. You're going to have Will Jeffers playing the 3 a lot this year. I suspect as the starter, I think he's going to be the man there, and I think he's got a potential to have a really good season. But with Odekale, Sabandi, Ethiel Horton, and now Jamarius Burton, you've got even more options of what kind of guard lineups you want to put out there and what you want those guard lineups to accomplish. You want to be able to shoot threes, you get Horton on the court, or you bring in Nate Santos, the freshman, if he's ready to play, as a shooter. If you want to be more attacking, you want to be more physical, you want to try and go to the net and go to the basket, and draw fouls and play that kind of game. I mean, Odekale can do that. Sabandi can do that. Jamarius Burton can do that because that's his game. Not really a shooter, but a guy who will attack the rim, a guy who will draw fouls, a guy who will go to the free throw line, and he's not a terrible free throw shooter. He's 68% for his career, but overall, I think I've seen some different stat breakdowns against better competition. I think his freshman year, I think against top 100 teams, according to KenPom, I think he was like 80% from the free throw line. So, I think he's good enough that you'll use that part of his game if that's how you want to play. If you want to play physical and attacking, that's you've got a couple of different guards that you can use in that style, and I think he fits in well there. And in a way, it's like. Well, I'm not going to get to Dan Oladapo yet. I want to talk about him in a second. But the thing here is, Pitt fans didn't jump out of their seats when they saw that Jamarius Burton committed. I understand that. I understand that the priority right now, the focus right now is getting a center. I understand the focus right now is on Efton Reed or any potential transfer centers who might be out there. I understand that. However, this is still important. Okay, that's the number one priority. That's the most important thing that Pitt can do this offseason. The two things that are going to impact this roster the most for 2021, 2022 is that guy right there, picture of him. You see him on the screen if you're watching the live stream. What Justin Champagnie does, what decision he makes, and what decision Efton Reed makes. Those two things will impact this roster the most for 2021-22. Those two decisions will impact the roster more than Jamarius Burton and potentially more than Dan Oladapo. Oladapo's impact will increase or decrease based on Justin Champagnie's decision. Those are the two most important things that are going to happen for Pitt this offseason. That doesn't make these commitments, Oladapo and Burton, unimportant. Maybe a little less important than those two decisions, but not unimportant. Because while you do need to find out if your star power forward is going to be coming back, and you do need to find out if that 5-star center is going to come and line up and be your big guy for this coming season. Those things are obviously very important. And getting centers on this roster, guys who can come in and play high school and or transfers, and ideally both. That's the most important thing. That's number one priority. But you also have to fill out the roster. You also have to fill out your depth. You also have to figure out who's going to come off the bench and provide quality minutes. And I think that's what Jeff Capel has done this week. I think that with these two commitments, with Dan Oladapo and Jamarius Burton, he's brought in two guys who, in your ideal scenario, can be high-minute bench players. And I add the qualifier of high minute because I think both of them have enough versatility that even if they're not starters, it doesn't mean they're only going to play 12 minutes a game. I mean, Burton last year at Texas Tech still played 19 minutes a game. I think you can get both of these guys into the 20s working off the bench because they can play different positions. In your ideal scenario, the best case scenario for Pitt right now is that Justin Champagnie comes back, right? I don't think anyone would disagree about that. That's the best possible scenario, is that Champagnie returns to the roster. If that happens, Oladapo is Champagnie's reserve, can play the 4 next to Champagnie if Champagnie slides and plays gets minutes at the 3 to play more on the perimeter and try and develop that part of his game, and can also slide into the 5 and play as an undersized center. Between those 3 roles, there are enough opportunities for Dan Oladapo to get into the 20-minute range. I think. And it's sort of the same thing with Jamarius Burton. You back up Odikali. You play off the ball. You maybe even play the 3 at times, depending on the lineups. You're talented enough that you're not going to be the difference between 10 wins and 20 wins. But you're talented enough that you can get on the court and you can help the team in a variety of ways, do some very specific things that you do well. In the case of Burton, it's attacking the basket to either A, finish, ideally, B, draw contact and a foul and go to the free throw line, or C, kick out to an open shooter, which might not be the third most important one out of that group, as we get a picture of Ethiel Horton on the screen right now. This is just, there's too much synergy with this live stream right now, folks. But between those roles, among those 3 roles for Jamarius Burton, there's a potential for 20-plus minutes. So you bring these guys in, yes, to work off the bench, to be backups, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to see a lot of time. You understand what I mean? I think they fit well in that role. And I said this on the podcast last night. I said it on, I talked about it on the message boards. I'll probably talk about it in the 321 column this Friday on Panther-Lair.com. That it's not like a fantasy football or fantasy baseball draft. Okay, where in those, when you draft your fantasy baseball team, you really focus on getting all your starting spots filled right off the bat. You don't really think about taking your second, third baseman when you don't have a shortstop or a first baseman, or you're missing 2 outfielders or something like that. You want to get all of your starting roles filled before you really start adding the depth to it. And it's, but it's not like that. The situation Pitt's in right now is not like that. You're trying to get all of them at the same time. And if you happen to get a few of the bench guys first, that doesn't mean you're not also trying to get the centers. You know what I mean? The starters. You need those guys as well. And I think probably the reaction to Oladapo and Burton has been tempered a bit by the fact that they're not starting centers coming in. And I understand that because I know that Pitt fans want to get those guys on the roster. They want those starters to come in, the big guys who are going to come in and really solidify not just the rotation, but the starting lineup. And I understand that. But I like I said, I think it's still important to get these guys, Oladapo, Burton, anybody else they might add of sort of, Nate Santos a couple weeks ago, the high school kid. It's still important to get those guys, even if you get them before you get the starters. And I don't think that means that Pitt's not prioritizing the starters. They're still working very hard on Efton Reed. They're still working on probably some transfer centers out there. They know they need guys to fill these roles. And Oladapo could very well step into a starting role if Justin Champagnie does not return. That's going to change your look. It's going to change what you do and how you run your offense. And I think Oladapo's strength is probably going to be in his rebounding. And I'm not going to even say that it's an improvement there because Justin Champagnie was a really good rebounder. But I think what you'll have is, a front court that's more rebound oriented, with most of the scoring coming from the backcourt, as opposed to, this past year where so much of the scoring came from Champagnie himself, and I think it would shift the balance there a little bit. Looking at the, I don't know if maybe nobody has anything to say, but I don't see any. Oh wait, we've got comments here. I'm sorry. The live stream comments were not showing up, folks. So I apologize if you put something. I apologize if you commented and I didn't get a chance. I didn't read them yet. Let's roll through a few comments here. A few of the comments and questions from people who jumped in during the live stream. Adam Brandt says, assuming Efton Reed goes somewhere other than Pitt, who do you think are plans B, C, and D that Pitt is most heavily pursuing? Is Hughley one of those plans? This is $1 million question. If Efton Reed does not go to Pitt, and look, it's going to be a real challenge. You know what I mean? It's a battle. You got North Carolina involved now. Florida State's involved. LSU is involved. And those schools have added other players. But they could still look when it comes down to Efton Reed. I made this point to somebody earlier today. Actually, I was having a conversation. When it comes down to Efton Reed, none of the schools that are pursuing him can offer the none of the schools that are pursuing him can offer the playing time that Pitt can. None of the schools have the opportunity for minutes. I mean, Pitt can offer him up to and including 40 minutes a game and a starting role. I don't know if anybody else can make that offer because there's nobody else that really, has the opening that Pitt has. I mean, Pitt has no other centers on the roster, right? I mean, Max and Madison, but he's probably still at least a year off before he's ready to contribute. And so Pitt's got that as an upper hand, the fact that they can, roll out they can offer that kind of playing time. But it's tough competition when you're going against North Carolina, you're going against Florida State, you're going against LSU, some teams that have, either a blue blood in the case of UNC or, teams that have had a lot of success recently. Teams like Florida State and LSU. It's going to be a battle. I don't think Pitt is out of it yet. I don't think Pitt has given up on it yet. But if they do miss out on Efton Reed, I'm not entirely sure where they turn next. We haven't seen any new offers go out to centers in the 2021 recruiting class. We haven't seen too many transfers, recently tied to Pitt. That doesn't mean these things aren't happening. I mean, Dan Oladapo happened fast. Jamarius Burton happened rather quickly and sort of off the radar. The staff may be involved with center prospects we haven't really gotten a sense of yet. So we'll find out. I don't have an answer on the plan B and C and D just yet. Is John Hughley one of those plans? That's I think they would like to have him back. I think they hope they're able to get him back. I think they're waiting for that process to play itself out. And I think it's to some extent out of Pitt's hands because they have to see what happens in the legal process. I think if they can, they will bring him back. I don't know if they'll be able to or not. We'll see. Ryan Doyle has a question about the spring football game draft. Ryan, this is a Pitt basketball podcast today. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We'll talk about that another day, maybe in next week's podcast or maybe on the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan on Saturday morning. 1-2, great comment here, Chris. It sounds like Capel has worked his magic once again, and we are now a shoe-in to make the tournament. Do you agree that we should extend him again soon? You're a funny guy or gal, whoever it may be. 1-2. Appreciate you tuning into the live stream, though. George Mitchell II says, Chris, Pitt needs more shooting. I would definitely move Sabandi to the 3 and continue to have Horton at the 2. If it was me, here's what I would do. All right, best case scenario, ideal world, you've got Justin Champagnie back and you land Efton Reed. My starting 5 is Femi Odikali, Nike Sabandi, Will Jeffress, Justin Champagnie, and Efton Reed. That's the way I'm going. I'm all in on Will Jeffress this year. I think you give him a year of strength and conditioning work, a year to get more comfortable with the college game. I think he can be really good this year, sort of sneaky good, and maybe make plays that help you win games. I like the backcourt combo of Odikali and Sabandi. I know you need more shooting, and that lineup I just put out there is going, you're going to be a little bit light on shooting. Sabandi can make threes. All right. I mean, he's a 3-point shooter. His career, he's 34% 3-point shooter. He shot a lot of threes at Miami of Ohio when he was there. Find the numbers here. He attempted, over 3 seasons, 554 three-pointers. He shot 33.6%. It's not great. He's not a sniper. He's not a sharpshooter. But he can make enough. He's averaging 6-7 3-point attempts per game. 2 or 3 3-point made per game. I think he can do enough to keep teams honest. Now, Ethiel Horton's still going to be your best 3-point shooter, depending on what Nate Santos can do. But I think bringing Horton and or Santos off the bench, coaches like to do that, like to have that 3-point threat coming off the bench and, a guy who can come in and knock a few down, give a little spark to the offense. So I'm going to go with my experienced guys. I'm going to go with the guys that can drive and make plays in Odikali and Sabandi. I'm going to roll with Jeffress because, like I said, I think he's going to be really good. And then Champagnie and Reed would be a no-brainer. In your ideal scenario, that's how I would line it up. If I want to go 3 guards, then I would go Odekale, Horton, and Sabandi, 1 through 3, and sort of figure it out after that. But then, like I said, you got Burton who can rotate into that guard rotation. And with those 4 guys, Odekale, Sabandi, Horton, and Burton, you can really find a lot of different combinations that can accomplish a lot of different things. And I think you really can mix it up quite a bit in how you use those guys. Let's see here. Adam Brandt follows up and says Burton and Oladapo make sure that the depth is there for the team to do well, assuming they can find a center. Should also allow the staff to maniacally focus on a center for this upcoming season. I think they are hyper-focused on a center for this upcoming season. They know they need to get one. We'll just have to see who they land. We'll have to see what they can find. But, all right, that's my thoughts on those guys. It's my thoughts on Jamarius, Burton. We didn't get a chance to really dig into it last night, so wanted to do a quick live stream. I appreciate everybody who tuned in. Listen, the conversation will continue. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, right there on the message boards. You can get into the discussion and the conversation about Burton, Oladapo, and everything else going on in the world of Pitt sports. Pitt football getting ready for the spring game on Saturday. Pitt basketball continuing to add to the roster. Scholarship spots starting to fill up, rosters starting to come together. We'll see what it looks like as Jeff Capel keeps adding. Saturday morning, 8 a.m., Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan. We'll talk more about this. We'll talk about Burton, talk about Oladapo, talk about the spring game. We're going to have plenty to talk about. Between now and then, make sure you check out the website, Panther-Lair.com. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in on the live stream. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you want to make sure you never miss a live stream, subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Pantherlaircom, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Go subscribe. You'll get a notification every time we go live, so you know when we're going live to talk about Pitt sports. Thanks again to everybody. Hope you have a great rest of the day, great rest of the week. We'll talk to you soon.